Can you hear
Sultan.
me? How are you, my friend?
Yes. Good, good. Are you Muslim? Alhamdulillah, Jesus.
No, not anymore, man. It's been about 4 months or 5 months since. So I'll just give you a bit of an update. I was born in Afghanistan. I came to Australia when I was 4 years old with my family. Obviously, you probably know what's going on in Afghanistan right now. My family escaped the
Yes.
Taliban because my father's family was in the military previously. They were educated, and anybody that's educated and has a background in military, the Taliban would have a list, and they'd go after them, find them, and kill them. So my family escaped, so my brothers and I can have a better future, and we ended up in
Oh,
Australia.
God bless
So
you.
thank you, my friend. So throughout my life, obviously, I've been Muslim because I was born in a family that was Muslim. My father still prays 5 times a day, and I obviously, growing up in Australia, had lost kind of being in touch, not lost my way of being a Muslim, but I'd forgotten how to pray and stuff. So I taught myself around 4 years ago. I was in university, and I learned through YouTube videos with an English translation. And then it was during Ramadan at the time. And I was fasting and praying 5 times a day using the university prayer rooms, and I wouldn't miss my prayers. Like I was that dedicated. On the way to university, on the way to the train station. I live in Melbourne in Australia, so I'd drive from my house to the train station and then catch a train into the city. On the way to the train station and on the way back home, I'd listen to the Quran with an English translation in the car. And the first 4 or 5 chapters that I learned, um, I thought to myself, wow, this is so peaceful, you know. It's teaching me how to be a good human being, not judging others, helping those that are in need, etc., etc. And as I said, I wouldn't miss my prayers, but one of the first bad experiences I had was on the way back home. There was a bit of traffic, and I was going to miss my afternoon prayers. So I pulled over. There was a mosque nearby, an Albanian mosque. I pulled over. I was running a bit late, so I did my wudu and everything. Walked in, and the prayers had already started. The group was all the way up the front. So, like I said, when I was teaching myself, I wasn't really familiar with the rules and stuff that much. So I went in the corner and I prayed by myself because I thought, hey, I've already missed out, so I might as well not, go into the group. When the prayers finished, I went into the room where the shoes were kept, and the sheikh in the mosque, he was a Somalian guy. Um, he came up to me, and the way he spoke to me, it embarrassed me so much. Like he pretty much like almost shouted at me. He was like, why did you go and pray by yourself? Why didn't you join the group? I said, brother, like, I'm just teaching myself, you know what I mean? Like, why are you getting so angry? And that one of the Albanian guys, he came up and he actually defended me. He said, the young brother's trying to learn. Instead of being so harsh with him, why don't you act nicely? So anyway, that finished. And then my experience throughout Ramadan was whenever we're about to break fast, I'd go to pray upstairs, and by the time I'm finished praying, I'd look around and there's no one there. Like my brothers, my dad, everybody would already be gone. I'd come downstairs and they're already almost finished eating. Same experience I had with many of the other families that I went to when we went to break fast at their house, so my family friends and stuff. And I'd always question it, like sometimes they'd make fun of me. They're like, oh, why do you take so long to pray and stuff? And I used to ask myself, like, am I doing something wrong? Because when I pray, I know exactly what I'm saying. Every time I bow down, every time I go into ruku and into the sajda. But these guys are praying so quick. What's the deal? So anyway, long story short, I lost touch again with prayers and stuff. I got busy with life. I started going out, went overseas and stuff, etc., etc. But in the last couple of months, in the last year pretty much, a couple of the Afghanistani people, they've got YouTube channels. One of the guys is very famous in my community. He used to talk about politics, and he used to show how, like, what the solution to saving Afghanistan would be. And it was
Yes.
very different to what most people, because in Afghanistan, there's many different ethnicities, and they're extremely, I don't know if I can say racist, but if you're a Persian speaker like me, they kind of judge you and they call you immigrants.
Judgmental.
They're very
Yes.
judgmental. They call you
Yes. Yes.
immigrants. And then there's
Yes.
there's Shia Muslims who are like a minority there. They're the Hazaras. Um, so throughout Ramadans and stuff, every year pretty much, they'd go and blow up Shia mosques. They'd go and blow up schools with children in it. They'd go and blow up universities and kill all the students that are trying to learn because they're against people progressing in life. They're against education, and especially against Shias, the Shia minority, who are very hardworking, mind you. Even in Australia, they've come here and they've built all the businesses, all the Afghan businesses in Dandenong. They're all pretty much Hazaras. Anyway, long story short, I started hearing all these things about the Prophet marrying a 6-year-old when he's 50, and he's a warlord, and he'd go and like attack others to take their wives and take their land and their goods and stuff. And I always used to question it. I was like, why are these people constantly trying to give the religion a bad name? Because as I said, I was so into religion at the time and even after it, because as I said, my family is Muslim, that I would think, why is it always them trying to put a bad name on Islam? And then it was one person, then two people, then three people. And then it started becoming not just non-Muslims, but people from my own culture and my own country. So then it kind of clicked on me, and I thought, you know what? My dad was always telling me, you need to get back into religion. You stop praying. I don't like it, whatever, whatever. It's better for you in the afterlife and all of that. So I started trying to teach myself again, because honestly, I'd forgotten like the basics of, what you say when you bow down and all of that. Um, then something in me was like, I don't know if it was a gut feeling. I started telling myself maybe I should study the hadiths, because at one stage I told myself not to believe in hadiths because there were stories made up after the Prophet, etc., etc. Then when I spoke to a few other guys, they said if you don't believe in the hadiths, you're not Muslim, because that's the teachings of the Prophet and the way he
Yeah,
lived his life. So I was
exactly.
like, all right, let me just look up into it. You know what I mean? Let me see what these allegations that people throw in, are they for real or not? So the more I started studying, the more I kind of, at the start, honestly, I was kind of doubting myself, and I felt like I was being, how do you say it? I felt guilty because every time something would come true, an allegation would come true, I used to feel guilty, and I used to tell myself, no, this is just the devil whispering bad things in your ear. Because from an early age, that's the excuse that we get taught. It's always the devil whispering bad thoughts in your mind. That's why you do bad things. But
Yeah.
now that I think of it, that's just an excuse for people's bad behavior. You know what I mean? And a lot of that goes on, especially in my country, which is a Muslim country where I was born. They
Yes,
pray five
I
times a
can
day, but
understand.
there's no humility. There's no humanity. You know what I mean? There's no way of being a human. They tell themselves that we are Muslim first, then everything comes second. Um, so when I started studying, as I said, firstly, the Prophet's marriage to Aisha, that became true. She was 6 years old, he was 51. And then when I brought this up in front of Muslims, they'd always be like, oh, but he didn't bed her until she was 9. So technically, he waited. And I was like, man, 3 years, that's still a child. Then I read other
Yeah.
hadiths where
Yep.
she says herself, the Prophet married me when I was 6. He moved me into his house into another city or suburb when I was 9. And I took my dolls
And
with
she
me.
used to play in toys
With
Yes,
on
dolls.
this is
swing.
this is this is where I'm coming. This is where I'm getting at.
Yeah.
I took my dolls with me, even though playing with dolls and pictures were haram. The Prophet allowed me to do it. Okay, so she got a little hall pass. Then the part where the Prophet would get my friends to come into my house and play with me. And then whenever he'd step foot in the house, they'd all go and hide because, they were, what's the call? They were being shy. Now that I think of it, I don't think they were being shy. I think they were scared that he might like one of them and marry them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then there was the parts where I started hearing about the paradise and wives that, you know, people that are promised, that get into heaven, that pass this test supposedly that God has created on this earth for us. They get 72 wives, and then you get unlimited.
More than brother in در المنثور في التفسير في المأثور from Imam Sayuti 12,000.
Yeah, no, it's
Can you
82,000 apparently.
imagine?
I've got the surah here, the hadith here.
I'm not,
Sorry,
yeah,
narratives.
I'm not talking about the slaves, the right hand possess. Only the woman's 12,000 and 100 boy. Ghulam.
Yes. So where I read, it said 80,000 servants plus 72 wives. That's Jami at Tirmidhi 2562. That's one of the hadiths. There's many more. Then I started thinking about it. I was like, what kind of God makes this life a test only for us to go into the other life into a, I'm sorry to use this word, but pretty much a brothel. You know what I mean? It's
Yes.
it's 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 a nightclub where you get in, you get
Yes.
72 wives, there's unlimited drinking, you've got little boys that don't have beards. So technically, if you're into boys, which a lot of people in my country are into, unfortunately, you can enjoy them and they're at your service. There's birds that you look at and then automatically they fry up and you eat them and you never need to go to the toilet. And the prophet also told his soldiers that, because one of them apparently asked him, they go, "Oh, prophet, if we die in battle, like you say, as soon as one blood is dropped in the name of Allah, we are promised, a palace in the afterlife that's made of gold and jewels and da 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 da. 72 wives. I can't even sleep with one woman here. How can I service 72 wives nonstop?" He said,
Exactly.
"No, over there you have the strength of 100 men. So you're
Wow.
constantly Superman and you're constantly boom, 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 one after another. You know what I mean?"
Yes.
When I read all of that, I was like, what kind of God makes this life a test, and then tells people that, in the name of God, if you want to convert someone and they don't accept, you can take their life, steal their land, take their possessions, and take their wives, and that's okay even without marriage. And in the afterlife, when you do die, there's all these promises of things that are very, very haram in this life. And that started making me question everything. I started
Exactly.
thinking, why is this happening? So then I was like, okay, whatever, that's that. Okay, no worries. It kind of makes sense, even though the inner human in me does not accept it because it's just not right. Then I
Yeah.
heard another thing. Someone said that the prophet had a slave boy who he had rescued, and he had converted into Islam, which technically became his adopted son. His name was Zaid, and he had a wife. Her name was Zainab,
Zainab.
and she was also a slave girl who had converted into Islam. And Zaid and Zainab had been married. So the story goes, and this is in Surah Al Azab 37:38. So I've got references. I'm not talking out of my ass like some people are saying in the comments. Oh, this
Chapter
is,
33, verse
yes,
37, 38.
37:38. Yes. So the story goes, Muhammad walks into Zaid's house one day. He's not at home. His wife is by herself. She's wearing some sort of clothing that kind of outlines her figure. And then I'm not sure, I haven't read it in a while, but from memory, either he says it out loud or he thinks something along the lines of, "Wow, look at God's creation. So beautiful, so curvaceous, so beautiful, so sexy," if you want to use the street
Yes.
words. And then,
Yes.
so he has these thoughts, and just after he has these thoughts about her, either the next day or not long after, his adopted son Zaid comes up to the prophet and says, "Oh, prophet, I'm kind of sick of my wife. Why don't you marry her?" And then he says something along the lines of, "No, no, every man should keep his own woman, da 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 da." And then just magically out of nowhere, not long after that, Gabriel visits him and brings this new message from God. And God says, "Oh, prophet, don't push away the women that I have gifted you. Why don't you marry your son's adopted son's ex-wife, so that there can be an example for the people after you that marrying your adopted son's ex-wife is not wrong."
Exactly.
And I sat there and I'm like, all right, the dude is not dead. If the adopted son died in battle and then the woman was there and no one could take care of her, like the excuse that they use for his other wives, the widowed ones or the older ones. I sat there and I was like, if he was dead, I'd be like, okay, she's by herself. It's Mecca back then in the desert, and women don't have the rights to go work, whatever. So she needs someone to support her. And he married her. I would be like, okay, but the dude is alive. Zaid's walking around perfectly fine, and suddenly, like I said, the surah comes in and makes it okay for him. And I started thinking, I was like, could it be that this person who is acting like the prophet of God, the last messenger, after
Yeah.
124,000 messengers came in, God still didn't have the power to bring people, onto the right path. So he sent this final one. And now all of a sudden he's demanding all these things, and just magically happens that whenever he likes a girl, even if she's 6 years old, or it's his adopted son's wife, then suddenly God sends a message and says, hey, this is okay. You have to do this because I have given you this gift of a wife or a woman or a child. And I started thinking, I was like, this sounds like someone that wants to make these things up for his own benefit. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And the people
Yep.
back then, obviously, they were in the desert. Half the time, they didn't even have a sip of water to drink. You know what I mean? They didn't have food. So he promised them all the things that weren't in the desert. He said there's going to be flowing rivers in heaven. There's going to be palm trees where you can sit under the shade. And I started thinking, I'm like, okay, we're in heaven. Is there going to be sun and moon? Why do we need shade? Is there going to be rain? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
why does one need 72 wives? Why does one want wine constantly? What happens to the women? You know what I mean? Because a lot of the times when you bring up the women issue, a lot of Muslims, I call Muslims, my family, even my mom and dad call a lot of Muslims in Afghanistan story Muslims. In Farsi or in Persian, we say Qasab Musalman, which means story Muslims. So they've just been brought up, and I can almost vouch and guarantee that at least 90% of Muslims in Afghanistan, because Arabic is not our language, they don't know the meaning of what they're reading and what they've been told. The mullahs or the
Exactly.
priests and the sheikhs that are in these mosques, half of them are child molesters. They literally molest kids that come into the mosque in the excuse of teaching them the Quran. They end up
Yep.
getting molested, unfortunately. You know what I mean? And this
Yes.
leads to a vicious cycle, and it continues on. They'll become hafiz of the Quran, and then they'll go into mosques because there isn't really any other industry for them to work. They're freeloaders. The sheikhs and the mullahs in Afghanistan are freeloaders. They wait for someone's death. They wait for kids to, become of age, 7, 6, 8 years old, so people can come pay them to learn um, uh, the Quran, and then they get taken advantage of. So, long story short, what I'm getting at is, like I said, a lot of times when you bring up the women issue with Muslims or with these story Muslims, they'll tell you, oh, what are you talking about? Islam is the first religion that brought women's rights. In the Quran, it says that heaven is at the feet of your mother. So then now, because I have studied, I know the truth, I say, okay,
That is a fake hadith. Is a lie. There is no hadith. The heaven under the feet of mother. There is no hadith like that.
yes,
The
no, no,
new
no,
writing down is not from
Not
Muhammad.
one.
brother,
Yes. Continue, brother.
even if there is, there's so many contradictions. You know what I mean? This is why when I sit down and I say, when someone tells me, oh,
Literally, Quran literally calls a woman animal.
that's what I'm getting at. On one end, you're
Hmm.
saying that the heaven lies under the feet of your mother. Then at the same time, your prophet is saying women are naqis al, which means they're half the intelligence. So therefore, their witness statement is half of that of a man's. Their death is half of that of a man's. Their prayers is half of that of a man's, because when they go through their menstrual cycles each month, they can't pray, they can't fast. Therefore, whatever deeds they do is pretty much half.
Even she can't touch the Quran.
Yes. And then I sit there and I'm like, what kind of women's rights is this? You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make sense. There's so many contradictions. There's literally so many contradictions. There's many other things that I've got in my notes here. So there's
Me
that.
too.
There's that.
I was just reading the when God the mighty and majestic decrees his creation, he laid down he
And put one
laid
foot
down
on the other.
yes.
Yeah, brother Sultan,
Yes.
if you don't mind, maybe I invite you to tell to brother and sister your testimony on my YouTube channel. What do you think?
Um, yeah, I
One
can do
day,
that.
when you have a time, when you are free, I will
Sure,
give you my WhatsApp number in a private,
sure,
and just tell me where you are free, and we can do it on my YouTube channel for all brother and sister listening to your testimony.
sure
If you
thing,
have
brother.
a time in the future.
Of course, why
God
not?
bless
Yeah,
you.
just message me. But before I go, also another thing, there's a video on my profile on my TikTok profile. There's many others, but I've uploaded one. I always used to think that, I used to see videos of Hajj and all of that, and it used to bring this, like, like I'd used to get goosebumps and like this feeling of like peace just by watching it. And then I used to hear stories of like people that I've been to university with who are still very committed Muslims. And this guy told me that when they went into Hajj, um, they went into these bookstores where they wanted to buy some book, or his uncle or whoever wanted to buy this book, a history book. And he said,
Yes.
I swear to God, he goes, when we asked for this book, it was on one of the top shelves, and the bookseller didn't have a ladder or anything, but he stacked up a few Qurans, put it on the ground, stepped on it to try to get this book off the top shelf. And he goes, that just shocked me, you know what I mean? When I watched one of
Mm.
the documentaries that came out, it was a while ago, it was on SBS on one of the local TV channels in Australia. They were talking about
Yes.
all these journeys of different people from different countries going into Hajj. So there was a dude in Indonesia who was a businessman, so he had it very easy. And there was one guy from Africa who was very poor, and he said he had saved for, I don't know, over 10 years, pennies he had saved to go to Hajj. And this poor guy had to catch a bus, had to go through all these, hard journeys. It wasn't just a jump on a plane and get to Mecca. When he went into Hajj, this was all being documented on camera. I swear on nature, which is what I swear on now because my belief in God is unfortunately gone for now. But I swear on nature and everything I love. They literally show this guy under those tents go to sit down to eat, and one of the Hajj police come up to him and tell him he can't sit with everybody else. He has to go sit with the Africans. All right, so they had a separate section for just the black people, and he had to go sit there. And I saw that, I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Then all these videos come up. Like I said, it's on my profile now. Go see it. There's guys literally pushing one another, screaming Allahu Akbar, trying to get to that black stone that's on the side of the Kaaba so they can stick their head in and give it a kiss. There's videos of women, literally, all you see is their heads moving around like old women, someone's mom, someone's grandma, someone's sister. All these men pushing around. There's no humanity. Everyone forgets about, oh, we're all brothers and sisters in the ummah, you know what I mean? We need to look after each other
Yeah.
because we're all servants of God. They forget about that. Everybody wants to
Allah,
do their own thing. Hundreds of
Allah,
people get trampled every year trying to throw stones at the shaitan, at a wall or a pillar where they think it's shaitan. It just doesn't make sense to me. All the people in the comments, please, like, this is the problem. Unfortunately, a lot of Muslims have no general knowledge or no knowledge of their own religion. Please go and study.
Exactly.
Don't listen to these cherry picking sheikhs that only show you the good stuff. Most Muslims literally cherry pick Islam. They pick the ones that are good, and they either don't know there's bad apples and bad cherries, or they completely ignore it. I
Yes,
explained this
exactly.
to some of the other Persian speakers or Afghanistanis. There's a growing group now of people that are seeing the truth, and they're trying to spread the truth so they can raise awareness about what's happening in Afghanistan, what's been happening in Afghanistan for the past 40 to 50 years under the name of God. All right, the country is literally
Yeah.
ruined. It's been an Islamic country. Everybody's been throwing jihad, but you see the kids on the streets begging. Kids that are 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. This is the most important part of their life. The most important time. They need to study and become someone, learn something, but they're on the streets begging, selling plastic bags. They're collecting rubbish. They're selling pens. They do that during the day, and you know what happens at night to most of them? The people that pray 5 times a day, they've got their foreheads are protruding because they've slammed their heads so many times on the ground praying to God. Those same guys that pray 5 times a day end up molesting those poor kids on the streets.
Yep.
And they
Yeah.
sit there and they point the fingers at non-believers and infidels, and they call everybody kafirs. Most of these people
Exactly.
that even migrate all right? They migrate into these Western countries, and I see a lot of Afghanistanis do that right now. They go into Europe, they come into Australia, they go into America. What they do, their name hasn't even been written in pencil yet, as we say in Persian. All right, they haven't even become permanent resident yet. They go into their mosques, they form these groups, they meet their other brothers and sisters in Islam, and they end up talking crap about the same government that has given them all the freedoms of their own people, regardless of their religion. No one has said, "Oh, you're Muslim, you're not allowed to come here because this is a Christian country." Why?
Yep.
I ask those people all the time, why didn't you go and move to an Islamic country? Why didn't you go to the center of Islam in Saudi Arabia? I would like to see you guys go there and live there for 1 week. They will treat you like absolute dog shit, excuse my French. Literally, if you're not a Saud, they will literally treat you like dog shit. And then you guys come here into Western countries and you talk smack about them being
Yes.
hellbound and them being kafirs and non-believers. You know what I mean? People losing their shit because some person exercise their right of freedom in Denmark or Sweden by burning a Quran. That's their legal right. They're allowed to do it as their country. These guys come onto the streets screaming Allahu Akbar, disturbing the peace. I ask you guys, brothers and sisters, wherever you guys are from, you're Muslim people, why doesn't anybody get up and protest when the Taliban and ISIS go and blow up Shia mosques, where hundreds and thousands of Qurans get burnt after they get blown up? Why doesn't one cleric stand up and protest that? But when somebody in a non-Muslim country gets up and burns one Quran, everybody loses their shit. Everybody wants to burn down police cars and destroy businesses and stuff. Is this right? You guys living in Western countries, enjoying the freedoms that they've given you, there's two possibilities of you living in a Western country. One, like most of the people that I know do, you take the government's money, you take welfare. Where does that welfare come from? Muslim brothers and sisters. Where does it come from? It gets
Us.
collected from tax.
From
Nightclubs,
tax of Christian tax.
Yes,
nightclubs,
us working hard every day.
guys, including nightclubs and brothels. All right, they pay tax. They
And
get
pagan.
Halal,
And the
halal.
pork. And the pork
Exactly.
also.
Yep,
Exactly. And that money gets into a pool and they start giving out welfare to all these Muslims. Majority of them come here and they freeload. They don't want to study. They don't want to work. They just want to take free money and enjoy it. I know people right here in Australia, guys, all right? They're married couples with kids. They will go and tell the government welfare agencies that his wife and his wife and husband are separated. The husband will give a friend's address or a family member's address, tell the government they've been separated, just to say it, so the wife and kids can get more benefits. Their paycheck increases. Then those same people that are on welfare as well, they'll go behind the government's back and work cash jobs. Okay, so they don't have to pay tax and get the free money from welfare. Your second possibility for whoever's listening, living in non-Muslim countries, is Muslim people that are living in non-Muslim countries. Your second way of living in non-Muslim countries, you have to pay tax. When you work, you pay tax. What do you think happens with that tax money? If you lived in America, that tax money did what? There was a war in Muslim countries. That tax money went towards bullets and explosives that so-called killed your brothers and sisters. If there's no war, where do you think your money goes? It goes to Saudi Arabia to buy oil. What do you think Saudi Arabia has been doing with that money in the last 10 to 15 years? They've been killing Yemenis. They've been making Yemeni kids homeless, all right? Killing their fathers, mothers. That's what your tax money is contributing. So how can you sit there in a non-Muslim country, go to mosques and scream Allahu Akbar in your rooms, and then still act like you're a good Muslim? That's what I want to know. But like I said, when I bring this stuff up, when I was Muslim, you know what they used to call me? You're a liberal Muslim. I had never heard of this word before. You're a liberal Muslim. You are whitewashed.
They
You're
come up with new genders, Sultan.
sorry?
Yeah.